Curse of Strahd, Part 6, Chapter 6, Old Bonegrinder. The Old Bonegrinder is a grain mill, slouching windmill that is now the home of three night hags, posing as an old woman and her two wretched daughters. This location is on the Salvatch Road between Barovia Village and Valaki Village. Player characters are likely to come to it before they get to Valaki itself, although they're not guaranteed to have to explore the place. I would recommend, as your player characters are traveling on this road, especially for the first time, to at least use the description of the old bone grinder, which is located right here, the old Slotch Road, etc., and maybe show them this sketch image of the windmill, which is a little bit off the road. They can also, you know, you can use this passive insight check as there is a raven atop the windmill, warning them about danger here at the windmill. Now, looking right here, this is the map of the windmill. You'll note it's an incredibly small location. It literally is a windmill. There is the downstairs, which has a lot of storage, including a cart. These squares are 5 feet wide, and this is, well, very cramped. And the players will realize this, especially if you have a larger group. Player characters will probably expect they can just kind of wander around in here, but the cramped quarters will come into play quickly. Also, the three hags in this location are night hags, but they will begin most likely in the appearance of older women of different ages and will probably be treated as being medium size unless they take on their true form. Because they're large size, they will find these cramped quarters to be even more cramped, and the difficult terrain in this windmill is going to be quite difficult for them overall, on top of for the player characters. I'll note as you continue to look through the area, here's level 1, here's level 2, which just kind of the windmill gears. It's actually the mill itself, I believe. As they go further upstairs, you get this bed chamber, and there is, of course, a trapdoor in the ceiling. It's not an actual trap. Some more supplies here, and then you get the pinnacle, which is essentially what lies under the onion dome at the top of the tower with the actual windmill itself. Now, I'll note there is no cellar or basement to this particular location, which is, in my opinion, a little bit of a flaw in its design. It would have been interesting to have some sort of larger area underneath here, perhaps a large round area or different shape, where experiments or prisoners, perhaps, of the hags and maybe some weirder, more interesting things might have actually been kept. You could add that to your campaign, of course, and add a basement and some unique creatures, perhaps some of the unique monsters that are in cages from the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, perhaps, or just something unique and interesting. Maybe a captive that might prove useful. Maybe if you want to beef up this adventure a bit, you could add a flesh golem, something similar. Now, as we're going through this particular adventure, mini adventure, I should say, it gives you information on the hags themselves, kind of their purpose on being here. They're just kind of living here in Barovia for the time being. They are both fearful and respectful of Strahd, but their leader, Morgantha, has left her heartstone, more or less, with a servant that is Cirrus Bellevue. He's, I believe, a mongrel man, actually, mongrel man, who is living in Castle Ravenloft. It's called the Hag's Eye. This allows her to scry on the castle itself and keep an eye on things, as she is terrified of Strahd, like most people. She and her quote unquote daughters are making dream pastries. These little mincemeat pies, which at one point she might sell in Barovia Village or maybe even in Vallaki. Well, if someone eats them, they make a con save or they fall into a trance and are able to have pleasant visions that are much more pleasant than Barovia. They're also addictive. Sadly, they are made from the crushed bones of captive children that the hags have killed. It's rather dark, and they're hags, though. This kind of reminds me of Grimm's fairy tales in this particular design of why the hags would do something so twisted and evil and then make dream pastries with them. Very grim is the way to put it, actually. Now, again, you do have the description of the windmill itself and some more details about it. The raven who is making noise and trying to warn the player characters. Here's the sketch of the windmill, which again, it does kind of show the stairways, but it's a decent image to be able to share the player characters. Unless you want to remove this particular image, which is probably a better image to show the player characters from this here, you could just copy it out with Photoshop or some other editing software. You get the ground floor of the actual location. You'll likely have Morgantha here. It's possible that she and her daughters, quote unquote, might not actually be home, and or maybe only one of them is home. Maybe one of them is off in one town pushing a cart full of dream pastries, and another is here cooking, and maybe the third is riding back to the area. Who knows? It doesn't. They don't all have to be here at once, but there's a possibility of there also being a dretch here as well. Because they're all night hags, you may note here night hags individually are worth 1800 XP. If your player characters are about third level, maybe fourth, even one of these hags might be a bit of a threat for that group. Maybe for the whole group, they might be able to take them, but three hags at once might be very dangerous. Now, as I noted earlier, these quarters are quite cramped, and with the hags potentially being large creatures or treated as large creatures, this would give the player characters a huge advantage in this location. These hags really don't fit well in this location. I can't tell whether or not this is an accident on the part of the designers who have made a classic dungeon master mistake of creating really big enemies that don't fit in tiny spaces, or this is like an intentional thing that, these are a pretty dangerous fight, but the players have the advantage of movement, which player characters often do. It does kind of fit the area considering the hags are such disturbing creatures that they might live in such a confined space. There's also some other information as you kind of go through here about various elixirs that the player characters might find here and hopefully don't drink. As they go through the other levels, it does give you description of what if this person is encountered here or not. You get the descriptions of the different rooms, but there's really only the four chambers, and that's pretty much it. You get some interesting items in these areas that kind of tie into the Dream Pastries storyline. Potentially some cheap jewelry there, which under the moldy straw mattress, there's a lot of flavor for how small this space is. You also get this great illustration of one of the hags who with the dream pastries, which I would definitely share this image if you are using the dream pastries segment, and I would recommend at the minimum trying to run the dream pastries segment before the player characters come here, or if you haven't run it yet, have them fight two of the hags and then the third hag they might encounter in town. At that point, maybe giving her some added help that maybe the player characters don't know about, like maybe an imp on her shoulder that's invisible or something else that might be interesting. Maybe some sort of guardian, like a chain devil, who knows. But you do get the top of the chamber, and there is a possibility that one of the fortunes of Ravenloft from the Taroka deck might be kept here in one of the locations at the top of the windmill and all that. Lastly, there are some megaliths in the area. Essentially, they have some carvings on them of different cities, and they tie into the mythology of the sort of religions and belief systems of the Barovian people. There's four cities carved on here: the city of winter, the city of spring, the city of summer, and the city of fall. And Mother Night and the Morning Lord and some other entities are kind of tied in with those sort of ideas, although what they represent is really up to the DM. It notes also that the hags worship an archfey called Keithlen of the Crooked Teeth, which might be an interesting additional enemy. Perhaps if you're doing a follow up of this storyline in the 2025 rules of 5th edition D&D, you could bring in an arch hag to get revenge on the hags being slain as a follow up storyline, and Keith Lane might be that hag, or maybe it's the daughter of Keith Lane, or whatever you're going to call her, who comes seeking revenge. Just an idea, of course. Again, it's quite small little mini adventure, but it's likely little stopover. As a DM, I know that you could probably run this in about 3 to 4 hours, maybe one small session, and then the player characters will move on or maybe burn it to the ground. Who knows? They might use it as a base of operations. It's a small mini adventure more than anything, but it works for what it is. Now, I don't think it's perfect. I think the one flaw is it's other than being incredibly cramped, which is and isn't a flaw. It's the fact that it probably needs some sort of basement to just a larger extra area to kind of expand on it a little bit. That I feel like was something they could have added more to it to make it a more interesting location than it currently is. As a result, I would rate the old Bone Grinder segment as a 4.5 out of 5. It's not perfect, but it's kind of up there. Anyways, guys, if you like these videos, please like and subscribe for more content. Check out my Patreon if you can. I appreciate your support.